Welcome to The Explainer. Okay, today we are jumping right into a truly mind-bending premise. For most of us, magnetism kind of feels like invisible magic, right? You hold two magnets apart and you physically feel this ghostly pulling or pushing across completely empty space. But what if I told you a new framework proposes that there is no empty space? What if, according to the source material we're looking at today, magnetism isn't some invisible magical force at all, but an entirely physical structural mechanism? Today we are exploring a fascinating text that attempts to strip away all those mathematical abstractions to reveal the proposed mechanical origins of magnetism.
Here is our roadmap for today. 1. The illusion of empty space. 2. Enter the absolute medium. 3. The mechanical twist of magnetism. 4. The death of the monopole. And finally, 5. Reimagining spin and matter. Don't worry, we're going to break this all down step by step.
All right, let's get into Section 1, the illusion of empty space.
Take a quick look around the room you're in right now. The space between you and your screen feels like a total void, right? Well, the text we're exploring contrasts two vastly different views of this space. The standard, matter-centric view assumes the universe is basically this empty vacuum where zero-dimensional point particles kind of just float around. But to make the math for that actually work, the author argues you have to invent up to 11 spatial dimensions. Now, the alternative is the medium-centric view. Here, the universe is proposed as a continuous, fluid-elastic tension net, operating strictly in the three spatial dimensions that we can actually see and experience.
So, let's talk about those extra dimensions. The source argues that when physicists realized a zero-dimensional point particle couldn't logically have physical properties like spin or charge, they expanded that point into a vibrating one-dimensional string. Enter string theory. But here's the catch. To keep all those strings from crashing into each other in a 3D model, the text suggests physicists basically had to invent extra dimensions, up to 10 or 11 of them. In this framework, those extra dimensions aren't actually real. They act merely as mathematical highway overpasses. Just to give abstract strings room to vibrate without breaking the equations.
The source really hits the nail on the head with this stance. Extra dimensions are viewed strictly as symptomatic patches. Rather than physical reality, they're seen as desperate mathematical fixes created to bandage a fundamentally flawed assumption, the idea that space is just an empty vacuum. Which brings us to Section 2. Enter the absolute medium. So if space isn't an empty void, what on earth is actually going on? Well, the alternative proposed here is a dynamic, fluid-elastic substrate called the DP field, or dissociative pressure field. I want you to think of it as a continuous, energetic tension net that stretches across absolutely everything. And it's quasi-incompressible, meaning if you squeeze it, it pushes back. Under this theory, the void does not exist. Everything that happens within and because of this continuous 3D net.
And this fundamentally changes what matter actually is. Matter is not some separate, hard little marble dropped into the D field. No, it is literally a localized, framed vortex defect structurally folded out of the medium itself. Imagine twisting a knot into a stretched rubber band. That knot is made out of the band, right? In this framework, guided by the nonlinear elasticity principle, matter is just a stable, self-feeding topological knot made from the universal tension net.
Now let's dive into Section 3, the mechanical twist of magnetism. This is where it gets incredibly cool.
This idea completely redefines magnetic attraction. According to the text, magnetism is not an abstract gauge field mediated by virtual photons shooting across empty space. Not at all. It is the literal, physical, transverse rotational twist of this continuous 3D medium. It's a structural shear.
Okay, picture sticking a magnet to your fridge. In the absolute medium framework, the charged particle in that magnet is one of those topological knots. As it moves, it physically drags its structural frame through the quasi-incompressible DP field. This dragging creates a literal rotational wake. It's a physical whirlpool of twisting tension in the medium around it. So that magnetic pull you feel on your fridge, that's explained as the literal structural twist of the universe's tension net.
And this mechanical view offers a really elegant explanation for Faraday's law of induction. You might remember from physics class that a changing magnetic field creates an electric field. But here, it's not just a random rule, it's a deterministic structural reflex. Step 1, the rotational twist or magnetic strain in a local area changes. Step 2, the tension net instantly faces a structural imbalance. Step 3, to prevent the net from literally rupturing, the theory states that the medium instantly shifts its translational displacement to redistribute that strain. And that shift, that is exactly what we measure as an electric field. It's just the substrate perfectly self-correcting its equilibrium.
So, how does all this microscopic twisting turn into a giant magnet we actually use in everyday technology? The answer is ferromagnetism. Normally, the tiny vortex knots and atoms are pointed in totally random directions, so their tiny whirlpools just cancel each other out. But in a permanent ferromagnet, extreme geometric packing forces millions of these electron vortices into strict alignment. They are all forced to twist the exact same way. So their individual rotational wakes combine to create one massive, macroscopic whirlpool of structural twist in the DP field.
Moving right along to Section 4, the death of the monopoly.
Now, if magnetism is a physical whirlpool, this framework suggests a pretty definitive solution to a massive scientific mystery. You see, physicists have spent decades and literally millions of dollars searching the cosmos for a magnetic monopole. That's a particle that is just an isolated north pole or just a south pole without its opposite. But we have never, ever found one. So why do you think that is?
Well, because this model defines a magnetic field as the rotational flow of a continuous fluid elastic medium, it actually has to follow the laws of fluid dynamics. A vortex filament in a continuous fluid cannot just magically end in the middle of nowhere. It physically must form a closed loop. The rotational flow has to naturally return to itself.
So under this theory, a north pole isn't some magical independent charge. It is simply the region where the rotational wake is directed outward from the topological knot, and the south pole is simply where that continuous fluid flow returns. Finding a magnetic monopole would literally require an impossible physical tear in this three-dimensional continuous medium. So in this view, the whole search for the monopole is basically a fundamental category error. It physically cannot exist.
And finally, Section 5, Reimagining Spin and Matter.
Now that we understand matter as a knot and magnetism as a twist, the text aims to solve some of the wildest paradoxes of quantum mechanics, starting with spin. In standard quantum mechanics, a particle's intrinsic spin is honestly just treated as abstract algebra. But in this framework, since the particle is a framed vortex ring, spin is defined as the physical, continuous circulating fluid elastic flow of that vortex ring. It is a literal circulating whirlpool physically pumping the 3D field.
And get this constraint, 720 degrees. Because of how three-dimensional space actually operates, you have to rotate the ambient framing of this vortex ring by 720 degrees, meaning twice around entirely, just to untwist it without snapping its connection to the background substrate. In this model, spin isn't just abstract math on a chalkboard, it is spatial continuum mechanics, hard at work.
So, the absolutely crucial takeaway is summarized right here in the unified dimensional theorem. All of these phenomena, magnetism needing closed wakes, spin requiring 720-degree closure, electric charge radiating outward as a sphere, and matter needing to be a permanently stable knot, every single one of these physical mechanisms works perfectly and exclusively in exactly 3 spatial dimensions. According to the author, 3 dimensions aren't just an accident, they are structurally selected by nature.
Now you might be wondering, does this actually hold up to real-world testing? Well, this framework doesn't just ignore existing science. At low energies, the author demonstrates that this continuous fluid elastic mechanics perfectly matches the insanely precise values of standard quantum electrodynamics, like the Lamb shift and the electron G2 measurements. The text argues that this provides strict, falsifiable mechanical constraints. It's offering a testable physical reality, not just more math.
The framework even attempts to explain the supposedly random constants of our universe. In standard physics, the fine structure constant, which is roughly 1 over 137, is basically an unexplained empirical number. But here, it emerges deterministically. The text argues it is a strict geometric projection ratio. It literally measures exactly how efficiently the closed rotational twist of a knot transfers into the open translational strain of the 3D continuous medium.
We've covered some incredible ground in today's explainer. We've examined arguments that the vacuum isn't empty, that matter is literally a knot, and that magnetism is the actual structural twist of the universe's tension net. So I want to leave you with this one provocative thought from today's source material. If the invisible, magical force of magnetism is actually just the mechanical twisting of the 3D space around you right now, what else about our everyday reality is just an illusion? Keep questioning, keep learning, and thank you so much for joining me today.